this video, the video quality and the sound quality are going to be awful, and that's just because I'm filming at like 20 to 7, so there's no natural light in here, as you can tell, so I'm very sorry about that. But I got a request from, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Ibtisam Dahir. I'm sorry. And he asked, or she asked, or they asked, what sorts of grades do you get? The answer is mostly A's in politics. I do English literature and music as well, and I'm not so good at those two. But mostly A's in politics. And he also asked, or they asked, can you do A2 topics as well, please? The answer is yes, I can, but I'm second year, so the stuff I am doing this video on is not going to be necessarily as competent as the stuff, or the UK stuff, just because I did that right at the end of the year and it was more thorough notes. With that being said, I am going to attempt to do the whole of liberalism, which is one of the isms you have to do for A-level politics, not AS, in as quick as I can. Like I said, this probably isn't going to be as competent as the other videos, and if there's anything else that you think should be in this video, feel free to comment it down below, because as I said, I'm still learning all this stuff. Right, let's do this. So, liberalism. So generally, the idea of human nature is rational, governed by reason, positive, self-seeking, self-reliant, capable of personal development, especially via education, and all of that means that their view on the state, economy, society and freedom means that they're more into limited government, private property, capitalism and a government by consent. Now, in terms of individualism, liberals generally believe that the state should facilitate individualism, and they have the belief in the supreme importance of the individual over any social group or collective body. They believe that we are self-seeking and self-reliant. Now, in terms of individualism, I'm also going to add in here that there are 4 different types. You can see I've made a little flippy thing. 4 different types of individualism that you'll probably need to know. First one is developmental, which basically means that with state help, individuals can reach their full potential and be fulfilled. Atomistic, which means that society is just self-seeking individuals, all atoms. Egoistic, so self-interestedness with the self at the centre of everything. And altruistic, that's hard to say, which means individuals possess a social responsibility to one another. So, in terms of modern liberal versus classical liberal, basically, modern liberals are more developmental individualism. They believe in positive liberty and an enabling state, whereas classicals are more atomistic individualism, negative liberty and a minimal state. So, some other things, let's go more into detail. Classic liberalism is economic liberalism, egotistical individualism, maximise utility, negative freedom, minimal state, free market economy, rights-based justice, strict meritocracy, individual responsibility and a safety net welfare, whereas modern liberalism is more about social liberalism, developmental individualism, personal growth, positive freedom, enabling state, managed economy, justice as fairness, concern for the poor, social responsibility and cradle-to-grave welfare. So, if we look at the social contract theory, now this is an idea by Locke and Hobbes. I'll be getting on to the key thinkers very soon. It's all about government by consent. Now, individuals who contract out of the state of nature and contract into the formal state of law and accept the restrictions but promise something in return. So basically, we say goodbye to how we were as nature intended, or as we are born. We commit to obeying these rules that we have set out for ourselves via government, and in return we will get something out of it. So we also have the idea of fragmentation of power. So this is related to checks and balances and separation of powers. It's a reaction against pre-Enlightenment states where power was concentrated in the monarchy, and it reflects a liberal belief in the rationality and self-seeking nature of mankind. So, let's talk about positive and negative freedom. Yep. So positive freedom is being in charge of one's own life to achieve personal development. It's the idea behind rules. It's all about enabling state. Negative freedom is where individuals are capable of making their own decisions. It's the absence of external restraints on the individual. It's freedom from rather than freedom to. Minimal night watchman state, and Montesquieu viewed this as the rights of the individual to be unencumbered by the state. And finally, democracy. So liberal democracy is that thing a contradiction. So yes, it is a contradiction in terms, because democracy tends to be guided by majorities. It therefore threatens some individuals with tyranny of the majority. Classical liberals favoured a limited electorate so as to safeguard property rights. John Stuart Mill thought votes should be given only to those with appropriate formal education. Modern liberals flirt with the supranational bodies like the EU, where there is a democratic deficit, and liberals seek to mitigate democracy's effects via assorted constitutional devices, e.g. the Bill of Rights and the Supreme Court. However, it is not a contradiction in terms, because democracy complements individualism, allowing individuals to shape their lives via the ballot box. Democracy complements government by consent. Democracy helps avoid the concentration of political power. Democracy is optimistic about human nature. It presupposes an intelligent electorate capable of rationality, and John Stuart Mill thought democracy would have an educative effect upon voters and thus abet developmental individualism. Right, what should we do next? Let's do... Right. Do liberals have a coherent view of the state? So yes, they do have a coherent view of the state, because liberals are optimistic, believing that human beings are rational. It is therefore coherent that liberals believe in a constitutional state drawn up as a result of rational discussion even, not decision, although decision as well. Liberals believe in government by consent. It is therefore coherent that their constitutional state should be seen as a contract between government and the governed. Because of the contractual nature of the liberal state, it is therefore coherent that liberals believe in limited government. Liberal philosophers like Locke speak of a natural society in which all individuals enjoy natural rights. It is therefore coherent for liberals to support a limited state. And the liberal state was a reaction against the medieval state in which power was concentrated in the monarch. So it's therefore coherent that a liberal state should be one where power is dispersed. But it could be argued that liberals don't have a coherent view of the state, for many reasons. First of all, the liberal state supposedly supports foundational equality, yet the liberal state was slow to adapt to the principles of democracy, sexual equality, and universal adult suffrage. The liberal state extols the natural right to property, but it fails to recognise that most individuals under the state's jurisdiction have not owned property. The liberal state defends government by consent, yet its constitution allows the consent of a majority to sometimes be defied via courts and assorted checks and balances. The liberal state is supposed to be limited, yet modern liberals have advocated a significant extension of state intervention in the name of positive liberty, and modern liberals have compromised government by consent by supporting supranational bodies like the EU, which arguably erode the authority of elective parliaments and representatives. Right, so another sort of for and against type essay thing is how has modern liberalism abandoned the principles of classical liberalism? So, on the one hand, yes it has. Classical liberalism defined liberty as individuals being left alone, so negative freedom, whereas modern liberals think that individuals are not free unless they are actively enabled via interference from others, which is positive freedom. Classical liberalism championed a minimal state, whereas modern liberals champion an enlarged, enabling state. Classical liberalism was inclined to see taxation as theft and sought to restrict it. Modern liberals often see increased taxation as the key method for implementing positive freedom. Classical liberalism favoured laissez-faire capitalism from which the state is detached. Modern liberals favour Keynesian capitalism. I would just like to import here, I'm not going to explain Keynes and Hayek in this video, just because that took me a very long time to understand, but I would recommend the documentary series Masters of Money, which you can find on YouTube, and that will sort you out in terms of the differences between Keynes and Hayek. So modern liberals favour Keynesian capitalism, where the state seeks to manage market forces, and classical liberalism had an ambivalent view of democracy, prioritising instead the interest of property owners. Modern liberalism has championed representative democracy. So, you could also argue that modern liberalism hasn't abandoned the ideas of classical liberalism. And that is because both classical and modern liberalism have an optimistic view of human potential. Both of them also believe in rationalism and insist upon tolerance of minorities. Both of them also see individualism as the goal of politics and society. They differ merely about how to achieve it. Both classical and modern liberalism believe in capitalism and oppose the state ownership of the economy, and both believe in a constitutional, limited state and government by consent. Easy peasy. So, now the last bit I'm going to cover in this video is key thinkers. So, for this question, you have to reference key thinkers of whatever ism you're doing, essentially. So the ones that are listed in the syllabus for liberalism are John Locke, Mary Wollstonecraft, John Rawls, John Stuart Mill and Betty Friedan. And as long as you can quote one or two of those in your essay, it should be fine. I'm also going to read out some just a few bits on some other people that may be of note, just to stretch and challenge, really. I'm not going to go into proper detail because it's only going to be a short video. So let's start with John Locke. So John Locke denied that the state was part of God's creation and that the monarch had the divine right to rule. Natural laws, liberties and rights. The state of law would only be legitimate if it represented natural rights and laws. So this later became the social contract theory. And he believed in government by consent. Mary Wollstonecraft had a big book called The Vindication of the Rights of Women, 1792. She welcomed American and French revolutions and believed that formal education should be made available to as many people as possible to reach their potential and develop. John Rawls believed in foundational equality, so redistribution of wealth via the state with extensive public spending and taxation. He also came up with the theory of the veil of ignorance, so people are rational and would choose a society where the poor would benefit. If you don't know what the veil of ignorance is, I suggest you look it up, it's a really cool theory. Developmental individualism and his book, A Theory of Justice. John Stuart Mill, he had a book called On Liberty. He was concerned that government and consent would be compromised. He had these two ways of classifying certain things as self-regarding or other-regarding. He believed in negative freedom with the harm principle and proposed representative democracy, power of education, and also coined the term tyranny of the masses. Betty Friedan believed all individuals should be free to seek control over their own lives. She said that gender was a serious hindrance to women because of cultural channels. And she also didn't believe in violence or disobeying the law as a means of pursuing change. So in terms of other people that would be cool to know about, I did mention earlier Keynes and Hayek, so it makes sense to start with those. So Keynes The Economic Consequences of the Peace, which was a book written in 1999, believed in capital investment, fiscal stimulus and capital expenditure. He was interventionalist, whereas Hayek was non-interventionalist, believed in the rollback powers of the state, promoting culture of enterprising individualism. Thomas Paine, local in my area, believed in the French Revolution, the rights of man, start of meritocracy. Montesquieu. Now the big thing about Montesquieu really is his triangle. So the judiciary, legislative and executive being separate entities in a triangle. Really useful when talking about constitutions and separation of powers and stuff like that. Adam Smith was all about laissez-faire capitalism, markets and the invisible hand, sort of sorting out markets. Whereas Nozick was more night watchman state, a challenger to Rawls, and a libertarian, not a liberal. Very important difference that. He also had a book called Anarchy, State and Utopia of 1974. Right, I'm going to conclude this very short video by again reiterating the fact that by no means is this a comprehensive guide to everything about liberalism at all. This is basically just scratching the surface. If there's any of you that are currently studying politics and you think I've missed out some really important things, which again I probably have, do feel free to leave it in the comments, because that would be helping me and loads of other people. Regardless, I really hope you learned something in this video, and feel free to make other suggestions of videos that you may want to see. See you later.